If you didn't catch my last video where I had this car out on track at Winton Raceway, at the end of the day I had a pretty catastrophic front left brake caliper failure, and well, suffice to say, this wheel is not supposed to be there, and there's no brake caliper there. But what's crazier is that this is the wheel that is supposed to be there, and this is its friend. Yes, so the story goes something like this. I was trundling along on my first hot lap on the 4th session of the day. The car had been going great for all the previous sessions, just about to warm up from a really fast lap. Well, I guess a pretty spicy lap. And I felt something odd under the pedal. The brake pedal felt a bit soft. I heard a bit of a clunk, but I wasn't sure exactly what had caused it. Immediately thought, no, that's not right, I'll come into the pits. But I was only about a third into the lap, so I had 2/3 of lap still to get back through to pit. And so I'm just trundling around slowly, wasn't racing fast, just trying to get the car back, and braked for the very last corner when suddenly the whole front left wheel completely locked up. It had locked up because the caliper had come free from its mounting bracket and jammed itself between the rotor and the wheel in such a way that nothing could rotate anymore. This wheel went skidding along. It's all gouged out all through the inside, and the only way I could get the wheel off the car, because it would not come off, was to cut the spokes out to loosen it up from the caliper and from the rotor to get everything off the hub. Let's rewind a bit and I'll show you how that story went down. Don't try this at home, kids. That's a very flat tyre, but at least it's free, but it will not rotate because that rotor's all jammed up with the brake caliper and the wheel. I'm just going to get the grinder and go zzz and break the hub section away from the rim section. That should give me enough movement to be able to get the outside section off, and if I can get this kind of barrel of the rim away, then the caliper will come free and all the rest of it will unbolt. Even undoing these lug nuts, this wheel is not coming off because that brake caliper is just jammed up in there against the rim. So, what an adventure. So, damage report. We can clearly see where the caliper punctured the rim here. Significant sized crack. And obviously all this scuffing which occurred as it spun around. Now the rim's obviously spun around a few times before it eventually jammed up in that hole there. On the other side, this is effectively our flat spot. It doesn't look too bad. I'm going to get some air into this to curve it back or straighten it back out. Maybe I can just patch that up enough to get some pressure into this rim to get this tyre kind of round again. I don't want it to stay like this too long because it's not really good for the tyre. Wow, look at this crazy mess. That is something I'd never expected to see on my car. But yeah, need to get a look at this caliper definitely scuffed up, but I think it might be salvageable. I don't see any damage to the brake line. And you can see there, that is a loose bolt. That bolt doesn't look nice. It's all funny looking. Don't know. Problem with these, is that gonna come off the rotor? Doesn't seem like it wants to move. The problem with these big brake kits is they use a big dog bone to kind of adapt from the hub to the custom caliper. And those dog bones are often made of aluminium, which is kind of soft. And the risk with that is that, well, it can kind of gall up and bind on the threads of the bolt. So you don't want them too tight, because then that can happen. You don't want them too loose, because you can end up with something like this. So potentially it was just a factor of the bolts were loose, or they came loose. Look, the brake systems get very hot, and so that sort of heat cycle can potentially work the bolts loose, I guess. I'm not sure, I'm just hypothesizing here. But at least now I can take these two lug nuts off and get the rotor off. The caliper will come with that. And yeah, I'm assuming if I can get the caliper off the rotor, then it looks like it'll be salvageable. We'll need some new pads. I don't think there's too much other damage in there. But wow. Never thought I'd see something like this on my car. Whoa, she's eaten up the inside of the caliper here. A bit munched up. Pads are all cracked, but I think it's okay. The other mounting bolt. Yeah, okay, so they were not, the threads have actually pulled. I don't know how well this will come up. I'm using the GoPro today because it's a bit more easy to work with, but that thread's stripped. So that suggests to me, yeah, wow, I'm lost for words. So this is our Bosenjack dog bone, and the bad news is that section's damaged by the caliper hitting it. Just looking at the threads here, yeah, they're all pulled. Like, the bolt can slip in quite some way. It's going in a good, what's that, nearly 10, that's 10 mil. So, I don't know. Potentially it was over tightened and galled up and damaged the threads. Maybe not. I think, now these bolts here have got a small amount of the copper grease on them. These are the bolts that hold this to the hub. But the bolts that hold the caliper to this, they're the ones that have failed. Well, the bolts haven't failed, but this caliper has. I have to assume they've come loose, but the threads have been completely torn out. Yeah, wow, crazy. And so damage report now that the car is rolling again, which is a really good thing. It didn't take too long to get it rolling, although it was a pretty significant sacrifice to do so. The rim was done. The rim was done. It had a big old crack in it and scoring all through it. So it was no way you could use that rim again. So I had no qualms about cutting the shit out of the hub. Kind of an interesting experience. It is a bit heart-wrenching to know that that wheel's gone, but that's kind of the biggest loss here. I did lose a set of pads, which sucks, but brake pads are kind of a consumable. Anyway, the hard bit that I'm sort of most worried about are these kind of custom-made dog bone things. I have to try and find a way to get a replacement or a repair. I don't know if I can repair it, given the damage is pretty significant. The threads are all chewed out. The two bolts that bolt into those holes, they've got gunk all over them, bits of thread, and yeah, so clearly, look, my presumption is the bolts had come loose or they weren't sufficiently tightened, and they got to the point where they were loose enough that the brake forces tore them out of the thread. Now, whether or not they were ever torqued enough, or whether or not they just came loose with use and time and heat cycles, I can't blame myself. I kind of do. I should have checked them. I should be checking them after, say, every track day or whatever, but who knows? I can't tell you when I last tightened them. Can't tell you when I last checked them. Shit happens. All in all, I feel like the damage isn't that bad. I kind of got away fairly well with mostly just my ego damaged. Having to get towed in from the racetrack is never a nice thing. You're costing other people track time. It took them... Look, the towy guys were great. They were great, they were quick, they were efficient, but nonetheless, it takes them 5-10 minutes to... Because the car wasn't rolling, it was a pain in the ass because you got to drag the thing up onto the trailer, onto the truck. Out of curiosity, I thought I'd check the bolts on this other caliper. This is the one that didn't destroy my day, and these bolts were also, I'd call them, say, finger loose. They seem to be fully tightened all the way, well, mostly all the way in, but there was a tiny bit of wiggle in there, and I was able to get it out without much stress at all. I did use the socket, but it wasn't tight. It was, you know, definitely not buttoned up. So I'm assuming they're working loose with heat and cycles. I'm sure I didn't forget to snug them up, but that's yeah, interesting. Now I should go back and look at the video of when I installed these to see if there were instructions or anything, or torque specs for this. I don't know if there were. I'll have to go back to that video. Downsides with this kit though, zero instructions at all. There's no detail on torque ratings or how to install or anything. Thankfully I made a video, which is kind of good. And one thing to note, that I don't always make these videos just for you guys. I often just make them for myself, for, you know, logging this stuff for the future. So here is one circumstance where having made a video is going to make my life easier. So yeah, interesting. The other side, also knocking on the doors of a potential issue. So plan is to get these rims replaced. I've got a couple of spare wheels of a different set of wheels, so I'm going to swap 2 of the old Avanti Storms for something else, and that'll keep me going. I'll chuck those on the rear, so we'll have the Storms on the front, the other wheels on the rear. The car will look a bit funny, but anyway, that should suffice. I think that tire is okay, which is a huge bonus, because a new tire is expensive. They're like $500 each. It's crazy how much they charge me for these tires. And yeah, the caliper seems okay, bit of scuff marks on it, but it's a tough thing. I think it's going to be fine. This is going to be the hardest part to find and replace or repair, so I'll get onto that immediately. I've got another track day booked in only a fortnight, so I don't really want to have to cancel that. It's going to cost me a lot of money to cancel it. I'd really rather get this car fixed and out there again. Fingers crossed. Thanks so much for your support. Thanks for watching. A crazy one. It wasn't high speed, thankfully. I kind of realized something was wrong early. If it had happened at a big braking zone, that would have been insane. Instead, it was just me kind of trundling to a stop at 50 k's an hour coming into the pit lane. So of all places for it to happen, it happened at the best possible place. That said, I'd rather it didn't happen at all, which seems fair enough. All right. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time.